Inside one of the UK's most secure prisons, inmates were working inside a recycling workshop. The facility was located at HM Prison Frankland in County Durham. This is a Category A prison, designed to hold some of the most dangerous offenders in the country. On the morning of February 26, 2026, prisoners were carrying out routine work inside the workshop. At one point, an infamous prisoner, Ian Huntley, bent down beside a recycling crate. Moments later, another inmate approached him from behind. What happened next triggered an emergency response inside that prison. Huntley was then rushed to the hospital, having taken blows from a spiked metal pole. Within just hours, the news began spreading across the country. Ian Huntley, the prisoner who had been attacked, was one of the most notorious criminals in British history. I will reveal the truly horrifying series of events that brought these two men together inside one of the most tightly controlled prisons in the entire United Kingdom. This video will make you think twice as I share the disturbing evidence. By the way, this is Dark Case and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple uploads every single week. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then make sure you join the Dark Case family now by simply hitting subscribe. I am a human, by the way. I can't believe I have to say that now. And it is actually a bad time to be a creator that is a human right now. I work tirelessly 6 or 7 days a week to push back against the vast quantity of AI content that is automatically generated and then overwhelms our feeds here on this platform. And it really has gotten to the point that I can't do it alone. Just you being here watching Dark Case means so much, and it does allow me to continue sharing these stories. However, I now also have new membership tiers here on this channel, meaning that you can access perks like early access and exclusive videos, as well as a behind the scenes podcast called Jack's House that I record in a cemetery in my car. I really do appreciate all of you either way, and there's absolutely no pressure to join as a member. But now on to today's silly little question. If you had to be any other animal instead of a human, which animal would you pick? Let me know down in the comments. And now, on with the video. HMP Frankland sits on the outskirts of Durham in the northeast of England. It's one of the United Kingdom's highest security prisons. Facilities like Frankland are designed to hold prisoners that are considered too dangerous for ordinary prison environments. These can include serial killers and offenders whose crimes have garnered national outrage. With prisons like Frankland, movement is heavily controlled. Prisoners are escorted between areas. Work assignments are closely monitored. Even basic routines are structured to reduce the risk of violence or contact between people that shouldn't have contact. Despite these precautions though, incidents do still occur. One of the inmates held inside Frankland for many years was Ian Kevin Huntley. Huntley had been imprisoned for crimes that shocked the country and the world. In 2002, two girls named Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman disappeared in the town of Soham in Cambridgeshire. The case quickly became one of the largest missing persons investigations in British history. Just days later, the remains of both girls were discovered near an RAF base. Huntley had been a caretaker at Soham Village College. After initially pretending to help to look for the girls, he was eventually convicted of their murders. He was then sentenced to life imprisonment. In later legal rulings, the minimum term of his sentence was set at 40 years. I have created a full-length documentary on this case, by the way, and that link should be on the screen right now. Inside the prison, Ian Huntley remained a highly controversial figure. Because of the nature of his crimes, he had been targeted by other inmates multiple times over the years. For instance, in 2005, another prisoner threw boiling water over him. 5 years later in 2010, a convicted armed robber pulled a sharp metal implement across his neck. Despite those incidents, Ian Huntley continued serving his sentence within the high security prison system. By the mid-2020s, he was still incarcerated at HM Prison Frankland, but by that time, another extremely dangerous prisoner had also entered the system, and his path would eventually cross with Huntley's. Anthony Russell was born on April 16, 1982. By 2020, he was living in Coventry in the West Midlands. At the time, he was known locally to the police, and he was struggling with substance addictions. But in October of that year, Russell would begin his own series of crimes that would shock investigators and the wider country. The violence unfolded over the course of 1 week. It began with a man named David Williams. David was 32 years old. At some point, Russell became convinced that Williams was involved with his girlfriend. I will say that police later confirmed that that belief was mistaken. But by the time investigators pieced the situation together, the damage had already been done. On October 21st, 2020, Russell attacked David Williams. He throttled him using a lanyard. After he stopped breathing, stopped moving, Russell hid Williams' body inside his flat. The body was pushed beneath a bed. It would remain there undiscovered for several days. When police eventually recovered the body, investigators documented 87 injuries. But his violent tendencies don't stop there. Instead, Russell's actions would escalate even further, and the next person that he encountered would be someone searching for answers. 2 days after David Williams met his end, his mother was growing concerned. Julie Williams contacted West Midlands Police on October 23rd, 2020. She reported that her son was missing. From Julie's perspective, she was simply trying to locate her son. Investigators later believed that Russell went to speak with her about David, and then, during that encounter, detectives believed that Russell admitted what he'd done, and then all hell would break loose. Russell then attacked Julie Williams too inside her home in Coventry. This attack was extreme. Julie Williams suffered 113 separate injuries. Police later forced entry into the home during their investigation. Inside, they found her no longer breathing, lying on the floor of her living room. So by this point, Russell had already committed 2 killings. But he still did not stop there. Instead, he left Coventry and began moving between towns. After leaving Coventry, Anthony Russell continued moving between towns in Warwickshire. Along the way, he committed further crimes whilst trying to avoid capture. At one point, he approached an elderly man at his home, asking him for directions. When the man was distracted, Russell struck him from behind with a brick. This victim suffered a fractured skull and a bleed on the brain. Russell then stole the man's Ford C-Max vehicle and used it to continue travelling. Shortly after this, Russell arrived in the town of Leamington Spa. It was there that he encountered a woman named Nicole McGregor. Nicole was 31 years old. She was also pregnant. According to the evidence presented in court, Nicole told Russell about the pregnancy and even showed him a scan image of her unborn baby on her phone. Investigators later determined that the two had only met a short time earlier. Despite this, Russell persuaded her to walk with him towards an area of Parkland known as Newbold Common. Prosecutors later suggested that he had lured her there with the promise of substances. At some point inside the woodland area, Russell then disgustingly violated pregnant Nicole. He then ended her time on this earth by applying pressure to the neck. After the attack, her body was dragged through the undergrowth and then left in a wooded area near the River Leam. 3 days later, on October 29th, 2020, Nicole McGregor's remains were then discovered. Investigators noted injuries consistent with being dragged through the woodland. During the investigation, detectives uncovered another disturbing detail, finding that after Nicole had disappeared, Russell had approached her partner and then pretended to help search for her. At one point, he even told the man, "I bet you can't wait for it to be born." By that time, he knew, because he did it, that Nicole was no longer with us. I will say that Russell had some real similarities to Huntley here, pretending to help to look for his own victims. By late October 2020, police were dealing with a rapidly escalating situation. 2 bodies had already been discovered in Coventry, and a third victim had now been found in Leamington Spa. Investigators quickly identified Anthony Russell as the central suspect, the man that tied this all together. A major search operation began. Police forces worked across multiple towns whilst trying to locate him. Meanwhile, Russell continued attempting to escape. He travelled through the region using the stolen Ford C-Max, but the searchers eventually caught up with him. In the early hours of October 30th, 2020, police located the stolen vehicle on a road near Burton-upon-Trent in Staffordshire. Officers approached the car. Inside it, they found Russell sleeping in the back seat. He was arrested at the scene. When first questioned by police, Russell remained silent and kept a blanket over his head. Later, however, he admitted responsibility for all 3 murders, as well as the robberies committed during his escape. The week-long serious crime spree was now over, but the legal process that followed would reveal just how serious those crimes were considered by the court. After his arrest, Anthony Russell eventually admitted responsibility for the 3 murders. He pleaded guilty to killing David Williams, Julie Williams, and Nicole McGregor. However, he did deny one key part of the case. Russell claimed that he had not disgustingly violated Nicole McGregor. Because of this denial, he had to go to trial. The case was heard at Warwick Crown Court. During the first trial in February of 2022, jurors were unable to reach a verdict on the violation charges. After more than 6 hours of deliberation, the jury informed the court that they were deadlocked. The judge then discharged the jury and ordered a retrial. The retrial took place just the following month. Prosecutors presented evidence and witness testimony, including evidence from Nicole McGregor's partner, the father of their unborn child. The prosecution argued that Russell violated Nicole and then ended her time on this earth in order to prevent her from reporting what had happened. On March 10, 2022, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Anthony Russell was found guilty. The following day, he was sentenced. For each of the 3 murders, Russell received a whole life order. This is the most severe sentence available in the British justice system. It means that he would never be eligible for parole. During sentencing, the judge described Russell as being exceptionally dangerous and manipulative. Russell refused to attend his own hearing. The court was told that attempts to transport him had actually placed prison staff in dangerous situations. And so, from that point forward, Russell would spend the rest of his life inside the prison system. Eventually, he would be transferred to one of the highest security prisons in the country, the same prison where another infamous offender was already serving his sentence. By the mid-2020s, Anthony Russell was being held inside the high-security prison system. At some point, he was placed at HMP Frankland in County Durham, the same facility where Ian Huntley was serving his sentence. Frankland houses prisoners considered among the most dangerous in the UK. Within that environment, inmates sometimes carry out controlled work assignments. One of those assignments took place inside a recycling workshop. On the morning of February 26, 2026, prisoners were working inside that area. At one point, Ian Huntley bent down beside a crate while carrying out a task. Another inmate then approached him. According to the available reports, the attacker was armed with a spiked metal pole. Ian Huntley was struck repeatedly in the head. Prison staff responded to the incident and Huntley was then rushed to the hospital. Doctors later reported severe brain trauma, along with multiple skull fractures. Ian Huntley was then placed into an induced coma, and then, days later on March 7, 2026, his time came to an end in hospital at the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle. He was 52 years old. It would be Anthony Russell that was identified as the inmate suspected of carrying out the attack. Directly after the attack, Russell allegedly shouted, "I have done it, I have killed him." Prior to the attack, it is alleged that Huntley was trying to bully Russell. If true, then that really did not go the way that he thought it would. Police opened an investigation and began preparing a case file for the Crown Prosecution Service to consider further charges. The incident quickly sparked strong reactions across the country and the world. Some people expressed a sense of satisfaction that because of Huntley's crimes, this made Russell a hero. But others pointed out a more complicated reality. The man accused of the attack was himself, serving a whole life sentence for multiple murders and other horrific crimes. In other words, this was not a case of justice being served necessarily. I mean, in a way it was. But in reality, it's just one extremely dangerous offender encountering another extremely dangerous offender inside one of the most secure prisons in the country. None of this makes Russell a good person. We remove people from society, but it doesn't mean they're no longer dangerous. It just means they're dangerous behind prison walls. And in places like Frankland, that just leaves monsters facing monsters. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.